Welcome to Myth Informed. I am your host, Brian Edward. And to the left of me, we have Jake. So Jake's going with one name, right? Jake's going with one name. It's kind of like Madonna.
No, we have. Sorry, I was trying to get the live chat and I just ruined the entire show. I'm sorry.
So today we have with us, and you could probably see him on the screen already, Chen, aka Roaming Millennial, and our producer Ian. Liam. Did I say Ian? Oh my God, Liam Neeson.
All right, Bob.
I was thinking Ian, Liam. All right.
Even had it written.
I did have it written down. All right, stop goofing me up. Anyway, Liam, what's going on, right? Liam Neeson. Liam recently got in trouble for saying what he was gonna. He's not Liam Neeson. It's Liam. Okay, so Chen is Roaming Millennial. She's a political and social political commentator, host of the podcast Pseudo-Intellectual. She began her YouTube career about 2 years ago, and has since gained over 20 million views on the platform, hundreds of thousands of followers. She's now part of Blaze TV. It's also appeared on Fox News, The Daily Wire, Rebel Media, PragerU, and the Rubin Report. Hello, Roaming Millennial, Chen, and Liam, not Liam Neeson.
Hey guys, great to talk to you again. We're excited for the event in August. Yeah, thanks for having us.
No problem.
Yeah.
Also an impressive guitar player. There's a really cool, if you guys have not seen it, you have to check her out where she's playing with Rucka, the Sargon song.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I need to email him and say, like, what are we going to do for August that's even better?
That was really good. There's one where you're in there and he's singing in that high falsetto voice, and you're playing the guitar and you can't stop from laughing because of the lyrics.
Yeah. I've watched that music video like an embarrassing amount of times just for my own amusement.
It's really good. I also watched it for my own amusement that many times. So what does it mean today to be a conservative? Has that changed in 10 or 20 years? Does this mean like Reaganism? Does it mean Trumpism? What has it changed?
I think it's kind of hard to define what it means to be a conservative, because I get people telling me, oh, you're not a conservative because you're not gay enough. Or sorry, like you're not anti-gay enough. There we go. We haven't quite reached the other part. Yeah. So I mean, I get people telling me I'm not conservative all the time because I'm not anti-gay enough. Now people are also saying that to stand up for free speech means that you're a conservative. There's also a difference between being like socially conservative, which I think like Liam and I both are. I might be a little bit more politically conservative than him.
Probably true too.
Yeah. It's I try not to just define my views as like conservative or right wing, because these are terms that can change over time and in context. It's a lot easier to define yourself based on where you stand on like certain issues. So that's pretty much a non-answer to your question. Hope you enjoy it and that was useful.
Do you get like hit for not being a conservative, like more from like the people to the right of you? I mean, is this the religious right? Who's saying this?
Yeah, I mean, it's like depending on the issue. Like we just did a segment on gay pride, and I had people saying that like we weren't conservative enough because we weren't being, I guess, like speaking out against the like homosexuals and stuff, even though, I mean, we were talking about how kids shouldn't be at like gay pride parades because it's inappropriate. So it like, it's like how, like,
and I guess there are neocons too, that sort of brand of conservatism that's gone a little bit out of style among the younger people, at least.
Oh, for sure. If you want to like see a bunch of young right-wing people get angry, then just talk about all the places you think we should bomb. They won't like that. And I think especially like for a while, it doesn't really happen so much anymore, but maybe like a year and a half ago, there were a lot of like alt-right commenters who would say that like I'm not right wing because I'm like a mixed race or because I don't want an ethno state. We used to get a lot of them commenting on our videos.
Yeah.
They would assume that I am like Hispanic and that he's an Arab. And
I get that a lot, actually. Yeah. I get that a lot. It's pretty good.
There's a rumor going around that I'm marrying him for his oil money.
So my name's Liam. Like, what's going on here, man?
Also, it's like you've never mentioned your oil money. Anyway,
your last name is Onassis.
Yeah, so I mean, it kind of usually comes from more fringe groups. You know, it's like it's a purity testing thing that they do. Yeah, and I mean, it is frustrating, but ultimately, it's like I'm not really looking for validation from the religious right to tell me that I'm conservative enough, or the alt-right to tell me that I'm conservative enough. If I don't fit your brand of conservatism, that's fine, but doesn't mean that I'm wrong.
Sure, I think it's interesting that you kind of bring up the point that there's a sect, I guess, in the conservative party that sees you as not being a real conservative. I think that kind of stems from, at least when I was growing up, you know, the general idea of conservatism was that it was mostly just like, leave us alone, or the government will just leave us alone, we'll do what we want. But now I'm kind of seeing the issue where, you know, as the left kind of gets further and further to the left, is that they're demanding more and more change in the world. Whereas I think the former conservative position that, you know, just let us be how we want to live is no longer functional. I think there is kind of a distinction that some conservatives are thinking we need to, you know, start pushing back. We need to start changing things back to the way they were.
Is that called reactionary then?
Yeah. I think that's definitely true.
To move the Overton window back is what I think the concept is, right?
Yeah.
Because even if you are just pushing back against change, you're going to be losing some ground all the time. So unless you're advocating for change on your end, is I guess this philosophy, then you're going to lose down the line.
And I hear a lot of people saying that the status quo has changed so far to the left in the past 20 years that even if we were to just keep things the way that they are, they've still already gained so much ground. So I think I mean, it's true to say that among the right, there is more and more this feeling of like, it's kind of, I think Will Chamberlain was saying like wartime versus peacetime conservatives.
Sure.
Like wartime conservatives are more like on the offensive. They're out for blood. They feel like it's like last stand scenario, versus a peacetime conservative might be more of what you were referring to. Like, oh, like just leave us alone. Things are kind of fine. I don't want, you know, anything really to change, but I'm happy with how things are. I think because of the culture war, that kind of conservative is becoming a little bit more rare, especially in the public sphere.
You think that's a good thing?
You know, it's hard to say. I think like I don't like to be too hyperbolic or reactionary myself, but also like I think, and I think this applies to like centrists too. I mean, people like Tim Pool, I watch a lot of his videos, and I think he's at the point now where he's kind of getting into that mentality where like these people are insane and something more needs to be done. So I mean, if you're the type of conservative who says, hey, just leave me alone, I think that's still a fine idea, but you need to understand that these are not people who will be satisfied to leave you alone. Does that necessarily mean that you need to be even more right-wing than you were before? Not necessarily, but I think it definitely means you need to be less complacent than you were before.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with Jordan Peterson on, like, in school, if you're told to write something on why the immigration policy should be X, right, as a seventh grader or whatever, that you should write not what the teacher says, like why we should increase immigration if you don't think that, or why she would decrease immigration if you feel like it should be increased. You should stand up for yourself, because if you write it down, you're actually training yourself to think that way. And whereas Ben Shapiro would say, no, just do what you need to do to get an A. But I feel like, no, you should write. I don't know if the teachers will give you bad grades if you're willing to stand up to them.
It's hard to say in that position. And I know we have a lot of like college age students who do watch our show. And I mean, I was lucky that I was in a liberal school for a year, and then I changed to BYU, not Mormon. I always feel like I need to add that disclaimer, but you know, it's not particularly liberal there, but you know, for a while I was in that position, and things were not as bad as they were now, and I felt like I was able to stand up for myself. But I mean, I try to never tell kids like, yeah, just like whatever it takes, like never bow down, because at the same time, like I don't know if it's worth necessarily failing in it. I think it depends on the teacher. You're probably right. A lot of them may disagree with you, but hey, if you write a good paper, they won't necessarily fail you. I don't know. I personally would be situational about it.
Yeah. I mean, I've taken classes on race and racism in the past. Like, it was about as woke as it gets, that kind of stuff. And I mean, my approach was to grit my teeth a lot of the time, because I mean, when you get into the deeper like white guilt narratives and that kind of thing, that kind of stuff, so you just kind of grit your teeth, because you feel like there's almost nothing good you could say that will become positive in some sense.
Yeah.
Usually, I mean, you try to, I guess, pick your battles, certain things, but yeah, it's almost like you're just in a situation where it's not only the teacher that will potentially come down on you, but you'll have some radical classmates as well who will now see you as some kind of colonizer, neo-colonizer, whatever it would be,
And actually, we interviewed Peter Boghossian, who I really love. I'm not sure if has he been at one of your guys' event. If not, you should. Oh, he was at Kilroy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was at Kilroy. He was scheduled to come to one of our events, but the Wall Street Journal caught them doing their journal right at the time, so they were super busy with preparing for that.
Yeah. Well, we interviewed him, and the way he kind of saw the situation is that if you're a student and you want to speak out about it, that's fine, but ultimately it shouldn't have to be your responsibility. It should be the professor's responsibility, the ones who are in academia, to tackle this. And so that's the outlook that I very much have. If you are in a position where you feel like you can make your position known, then that's great, go for it. But if not, it just means that the onus to stand up really needs to be on the people who are in positions where they have a greater platform or are less vulnerable.
Okay. Now back to like the conservative question. Ben Shapiro believes, he says, I'm a libertarian fiscally, but socially conservative. Are you the reverse, or like how do you feel like on fiscal versus like social conservatism?
How would you define like fiscally conservative versus libertarian? I guess is that like you can tax me, but only if you spend it on wars. Like,
I think that you could make a conservative argument that we need to protect American industries, that we need to make America's completely functional, that we should only allow X amount of products to be pushed outside and certain and so forth. That would be, I think, a strongly conservative economic policy, because you're worried about a rainy day.
Yeah.
What's going to happen if all the steel industry is in China and now we're at a war?
I tend to be pretty much for free trade. I think maybe if you're talking about the steel industry, there's an argument to be made for national security because of its importance in wartime. But what's actually made me probably reconsider my stance on economics more so than anything else, and we've talked about it on the show, is the whole issue of automation.
Oh, yeah.
With automation, there are a lot of people who are essentially being automated out of the workforce who may not be able to find other jobs that they're capable of doing. So when it comes to issues like that, it's kind of like, okay, well, do I support the free market in a sense, even if it means that it's going to lead to greater unemployment for people? Of course, the theory in economics is that if the free market is working, the good will always be greater than any harm done to one specific group. But when we're talking about the real world here, that harm done to one specific group could mean hundreds of thousands of people unemployed. And it's hard to have a functioning society with no civil unrest when you have that going on. So that's kind of really been what I've been thinking about a lot lately. Not very optimistically. I would say that I guess I'm conservatarian when it comes to economics. There are some things that, for example, the Trump administration has done with tariffs that I'm not so wild about, but I guess even then it would depend on whether you see tariffs as the end goal or a negotiation tactic.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think I myself used to be very, almost to the point of like laissez-faire, like free markets. But I mean, in the recent years, I've kind of gotten more in the way of thinking that, well, at least kind of, I guess, seeing that free markets don't tend to work when you just let them be. So I guess are you a proponent of like absolutely free markets, or I guess where do you draw the line? Like what type of government intervention should there be, if any?
Well, I think sorry, go ahead.
That was it.
Oh, okay. I think probably the most topical example of where I'm in favor of intervention would be in the area of monopolies. I think that monopolies can absolutely be predatory. Apparently, there's a split opinion now whether that makes you for or against the free market. When I was in school, I remember that we learned about things like monopolies as being anti-free market because they're able to act in a way that manipulates the market. Apparently now a lot of libertarians would disagree with that. But for example, yeah, and in the case of a monopoly, I don't have a problem with antitrust laws at all.
Okay. I mean, what do you see as monopoly? I mean, some would argue that Amazon's getting to the point of monopoly, even though I mean, you'd argue that there's always going to be another competitor. So it'll never be an actual definitional monopoly. But where do you get to the point of like a practical monopoly? I mean, would you just say Amazon's there? Would they ever approach it? I mean, I know Ben Shapiro, for one, is very against breaking Amazon up, but I would say that I think Amazon's getting a little too big for its britches, to put it lightly.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I believe in the definition of monopoly that's advocated by things like the Sherman Antitrust Act. Monopoly is not, is it impossible to enter the market and become up a competitor? It's defined by what share of the market do you have. With the example of Google, you could say, well, you could start your own search engine. Nothing's preventing you. It's like, yeah, but Google's share of the market is so big that it is, in essence, a monopoly. So that's kind of the way I would look at it. And I especially think that regardless of whether barriers exist or not, when you get so big to a certain point, issues like potential collusion also begin to arise. So yeah.
Yeah, well, what I worry about a little bit is like the railroad industry. It seems like this is where we got a lot of our antitrust laws. Lots of things were going on where industries, there was almost no regulation. You could thin out your stock to stop a takeover, that you could do a lot of things to really hurt and gouge the populace price wise. But look what happened to the railroad industry now. I mean, essentially it's a government run program. There's two different train companies they're completely run by the government, which is a little bit what I'm worried about with government screwing around with social media. Is they're just going to be like Facebook and Twitter, and they're going to be so regulated that we lose functionality on this. You know, it seems weird. I mean, nobody seems to care about the railroads anymore, maybe because they're not as important as they used to be, right? Like just freight delivery and slow delivery. They used to be the way we got around the country. The railroads were much more important. I don't know. It's weird with social media. I worry about the government getting involved. And there's a new law being proposed by I can look up the name, but he is proposing a law that unless they submit, social media companies submit to an outside auditor to make sure that their algorithms are and their censoring of content is unbiased, then they lose immunity to their onto Section 230 of Rights Act. What do you feel on that?
Well, there have been a couple. We interviewed Will Chamberlain a while ago on our show, who's a lawyer. You guys should follow him on Twitter if you don't know. He talks a lot about this whole issue of social media censorship.
Basketball player too.
Oh, sports. Yes, I know sports. So he talks about the issue that he doesn't think that breaking up the social media companies goes far enough. He actually very much wants to be able to declare social media use a civil right. That I see less likely to happen. I think it would be a challenge to try and say that social media use is a civil right. And I think it would also have some issues about if it is a civil right, then can we ban anybody for any reason, even if it's something like doxing or fake accounts or spamming or something like that. So I can see issues with that. I do think that right now the social media companies are trying to, eat their cake and have it too, is the proper way to say that saying we learned from the Unabomber series, where they're trying to act as publishers and platforms. I would love to see a class action suit be brought against them that would have to make them choose which one they are. Like if you don't want to be held liable for what people are saying on your show, on your platform, then stop curating content to the point that you are. I think that is necessary to be done. And I would rather, I think a lot of people have just lost hope in big tech behaving well. I would love to see things done that don't include some sort of internet government regulation or bureau. I think probably making them choose between platform or publisher is one of the least invasive options we have right now.
That's a good point. Okay, we got a super chat from Miles. And I hope I'm pronouncing this right.
Kinslow?
Right, yeah.
Oh yeah, he watches our podcast.
Yeah, he's this is I don't know, maybe the 5th or 6th super chat we've got from him. So thanks, Miles. We appreciate it. He says, hey, guys, great point on the peacetime versus wartime conservatives. I think that right-leaning people should not cede any ground to the left, confront every issue. Do you guys want to comment on that?
Well, I mean, I've had people... It's kind of hard, right? Because if you look at what issues have been traditionally thought of as right-wing issues, it's okay, I don't want to cede any ground to the left. Does that mean I need to start speaking out against interracial marriages then? At what point do you admit you ceded ground versus like, okay, my original opinions weren't in line with what my actual values were.
What if he said,
yeah.
what if it was decided based on your own values? So if the interracial marriage thing doesn't violate your values, then you don't speak up. But as soon as it does, let's say you are a junior and, you know, in college, and you do have to write a term paper that is against your values, or somebody at work is asking you to do something that you don't support, that you should not do that little thing and then vote the way you want, but you should oppose it right then and there.
I think that makes sense. Like,
I mean, that's a really tough question because it really talks about, are you utilitarian or deontological, right? Like, are you doing something because you're compelled to do it, or are you doing something because you think the end result matters? Because you might, if you have to speak out, you might look like an idiot sometimes. It might be counterintuitive to your cause. So it depends. You have to read the situation, if you ask me.
Well, I know for us, like, we talk about cultural issues a lot, and that's kind of like what our audience responds to the most. I mean, we're the young people who are engaged with the youth media. So like, that's what we're interested in too. And I will have some conservatives saying like, why does this stuff matter? You should be talking about policy. It's like, well, it all matters. Like, you can't say that. I mean, yeah, a kid getting kicked out of class for refusing to say there are more than two genders matters less than, you know, what Congress is passing right now, because it doesn't. Like, it all matters. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I'm not going to be petty about it. Like, I know Ben Shapiro refuses to call any trans person by their preferred pronouns, like, ever. I don't feel the need to do that. I do get called not a conservative for calling Blair White she, but it's like, look, she looks like a she to me. This is easiest for me anyway. So, yeah, I don't see a need to make a big fuss out of that.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. But if you looked and back to like the conservative thing, but imagine you were a banker sometime around 2008, you could have made a decision to say, hey, I'm not going to invest in things that are laced with a lot of these subprime mortgage securities. You could say, like, this is wrong. This is milking down. This isn't the way I do banking. And if you didn't do that, your bank probably would have been okay during the financial crisis. I mean, again, your own values, sticking to your values. Like, I know it's legal. I know everyone else is doing it. I'm not going to do it out of principle.
Well, I mean, with stuff like that, I think it's a lot more, I mean, probably most important in terms of like how you live your everyday life. And I know like both of us kind of take that approach in our personal life. Like, there are a lot of things like socially that are acceptable and permissible and even celebrated that we just will not partake in because it conflicts with our values. So, I mean, yeah, I think I'm probably more inclined to be like really, really hard and fast in terms of the social issues than maybe even politically. And I think that stems from my belief that if our social lives were sorted out, politics would be a lot less important and a lot less inflammatory.
You're probably right.
Well, I guess to make a awkward segue, a kind of an interesting intersection today, and you know, the difference in between politics and like the social good that you see in the world.
We're going to talk intersectionality.
Intersectionality. Yeah, we're reappropriating the term. But we really see. I mean, I'm sure you've heard of it. The Carlos Maza, Steven Crowder thing. I guess we don't need to rehash the whole thing. But my question, being more like this type of censorship, we're seeing more and more of it. Like, why do you think you see these companies like Vox trying to shout out to individual creators such as yourself, such as Sargon, such as, you know, Steven Crowder? Why are they doing this? What do you think?
And is it censorship? We were having a debate too earlier before the podcast. Like, is demonetization censorship? Like, so both.
Well, okay. So with the whole Carlos Maza Vox thing, I think it's twofold. I think they are ideologically opposed to people like Steven Crowder, would love to see him lose his platform. And I think there's also a line being drawn between old media and new media, right? I mean, there are people on Fox that Maza goes after all the time, but never with the vitriol that he goes after Crowder with. I think places like Vox do see YouTubers as competition for ad dollars and for viewers. That's part of it.
Could it be personal too?
Sorry?
Is it personal?
What do you mean?
Like that he just hates Crowder?
Huh.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Crowder has said stuff about Maza that we would never say about anybody on our show. Like, I say that openly, like on our episode that we did it about it.
He pushes the line a lot. You know, even his shirt that he got in trouble for, the socialism is for figs shirt. You know, he has a comedy show. That's where it becomes complicated, right?
Yeah.
His show is supposed to be comedic, like kind of like a late night talk show. And So that's where I sympathize with him in terms of what I would say on our show, where we're trying to take things a little bit more seriously, is definitely different than what the situation he's in, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, the whole thing with Crowder, I have no doubt that Mazda doesn't like Crowder. Like, I can easily see him not liking Crowder, but the fact that he waited for so long to go after Crowder, and that he goes after him during Pride Month before the Vox walkout, that kind of, to me, leads me to suspect it's not purely personal. And I forget what the other question was.
Is that okay? So he does get censored. He still has a YouTube channel. But we were talking about before this, and some people were saying, Sean was saying that demonetization is censorship. And I think, Jake, you and I were both saying, no, I mean, it's demonetization. They didn't actually censor him. There's actually a third way. It's kind of, they've made it an intermediate ground that pleases nobody.
Well, I think my understanding of whether it's censorship or not largely relies on how the YouTube algorithm functions. So we know that if you are demonetized, YouTube treats your video differently than if it were. Yeah. If you're demonetized, YouTube is not going to be as likely to show you in search results or in video recommendations. And I've talked to someone at YouTube about this, and they've said, oh, well, it's because, if your video isn't monetized, then it leads us to believe that there's something that's not as appropriate in there. There might be something more controversial.
Those videos
that's what I think it more is. Like, if why recommend a video you're not going to be making money off of. So if it were maybe just, hey, I'm not going to pay you for your content, then I would say that's probably not the general definition of censorship. But if it's, I'm going to place a ruling on your content that not only disincentivizes you to make it, but also almost hides it from people and makes it less likely to show up, curates, means that your content won't be curated with what we're going to be showing audiences, then I think it's leaning a lot more towards censorship.
Sure. I guess and this is probably giving YouTube the most graceful possible reading into their actions, but let's say that they're trying to just they're trying to get a hold of the platform. They see it's gotten out of control, and they're trying to kind of dial it back, get more control of what content gets out, and they say, well, we're going to demonetize this channel because XYZ, and as a result of that, it gets censored. Doesn't get to as many people. Do you see that as being, I guess, different than them directly saying we're not going to promote your video? It's a result of what they're doing, but they're not directly doing that with their actions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't see a difference between it. I think in either case, they're curating content, which as a publisher, they're not supposed to be, as a platform, right, they're not supposed to be doing. So I would say, like, in either case, that's fine. Don't show our videos if you don't want people to, but you can't claim that you're just some passive observer if that's what you do.
I'd actually prefer that they announced that they were censoring or lightly censoring Crowder's channel, because it's the honest thing. And I think that people react to that more, because what happens is, in this case, I mean, Crowder probably made a lot of money off that thing, because a lot of people bought Mug Club and what have you, and went to support the show, which is a boon for him in the short term, at least. But going forward, he's going to be a lot less visible to newcomers, to new people, and people are going to forget that he's been censored in some sense, and so he's going to have a lesser impact going forward, and we're just going to slowly put that to the back of our mind, because YouTube didn't tell the world that he's going to get less views now.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's kind of been like an uphill battle for us, at least. In January, they announced that they weren't going to be.
Hello? I think we lost him.
In January, it's going to be, well, Knight's Armament here. Sorry.
Are you back? Keep going, Ryan.
So yeah, I think we're having connections issues. I'm not sure you can hear me, but Knight's Armament makes a good point, saying it's partial censorship, and there's no doubt that it's a punishment, right? I mean, like when you're being demonetized, you're definitely being punished. Now, and somebody else in the chat here, and I don't have my glasses on, so I can't read the name, but it's that Chris, but saying that you should apply these rules the same way. So if you're going to apply something to hold Steven Crowder to X standard, you need to be holding everybody to the same standard. And I really think that YouTube has been awfully vague and not very good on applying standards consistently.
So would you support this the bill you brought up earlier, kind of about them making the distinction, about them either needing to make the distinction that I am? Sorry, we're having technical issues. So Brian, would you say that you would support this representative saying that either they need to subject themselves to an external independent auditor, or
no?
their
Because well, now we're gonna sit there and say, is the auditor okay? This is the gerrymandering problem. Like, how are you going to create an impartial group that's going to determine this? Are you guys back? I
Doesn't look like
cannot hear them. So yeah, I'm not sure what's going on, but
excuse us while we spin our wheels here.
without doing it, you can. Are you there, Sean? Or what you can still promote through YouTube. Like you could promote like your channel's monetized and you're in the algorithm. You could still say, hey, check out.
Right.
And
you can say, hey, I'm selling merch on my channel. Hey, I got all the sponsorship. You can.
Are you guys back in?
It looks to us like we never left.
All right, we can hear you.
Wow.
Now.
Like for a while we were just kind of spinning there because we were
watching.
Yeah, we were watching. We could hear
Yeah.
everything you were saying. That was really weird.
That is bizarre. Sorry, we were like completely ignoring you guys there.
No, it's okay. I don't know what's happening with that. I'm sorry.
Censoring us.
Right. But I mean, and also with Crowder, they could pull him back. Like 3 years from now, they could quietly remonetize him. So in some ways, yeah, it's a punishment, but now we just have to say, did he deserve it? I mean, Brett, you guys kind of had mentioned, well, some of the stuff was a little harsh. I listened to Brett Weinstein's channel, and he was saying that Crowder he was like, don't be a dick, dude. And he said that he had gone too far and he had mixed reviews on this.
Well, I think it's fair to say, like, don't be a dick. And if the whole conversation we were having was just like, hey, everybody, let's kind of relax the rhetoric, I think that would be one thing. And, I would be happy to be a part of that conversation. But I think what YouTube is doing is a lot more malevolent and insidious.
Well, when you compare it to what like late night talk show hosts do that are like famously left wing, these huge
they say a lot worse.
They're always on the trending page. They do very, very similar things, just to the other side. So it's like, did Crowder violate some of the vague YouTube terms? I think that there's an argument that he did, definitely. But then again, how are they applying that?
Yeah, like
across the board.
If you want to say that if you want to say that what Crowder did broke TOS, then you have to take people like Stephen Colbert and Trevor Noah and Samantha Bee and all of them down too, because Jimmy Kimmel, because they've said way worse. I don't think we want to go down the route where we just start policing what jokes comedians can say. And I think like regarding the the independent review of whether big tech is censoring us or something, I actually would. One of the reasons why I'm hoping for like some sort of class action lawsuit is because I would love for them to have to go through the discovery phase. I would love it. I don't know how effective that would be or whether the ruling would end up being impartial. I think there's a good chance of saying like, no, why on earth would it be any more impartial than anything we've seen so far? But at the very least, I think a lot of us, me especially, would love to see some of the documentation. I don't know if you guys follow Project Veritas, but they just did not that long ago, a leak on Pinterest. Found out that they were censoring Live Action, who's a pro-life group. They've done stuff on Facebook. Leaked documents showed that like people like Steven Crowder and Mike Cernovich, they were getting deboosted. They had one of our videos listed as an example of troll behavior. There's a lot that goes on in these tech companies that I think the world should see. They
considered Lauren's channel a troll channel deserving of censorship.
That's incredible. Like when you get nailed with this, then I'm gonna know. Then maybe I'll listen to this a little bit more, because I'll be like, okay, that's egregious. But right. I'm a little bit with Brett there. I can see where Crowder like that it's a borderline case. But you're no doubt that the rules don't seem to be applied fairly. If we
No.
could all learn what the standard is, there would be something to be gained from the fall here. Like everyone would know, but I don't think we still don't know.
Right. It seems to just be getting so much worse and worse lately. I mean, to a certain point, what do you think that we can do about it? Is there anything we can do about it? I mean, there's other platforms that come up, but I mean, they're not really gaining the same traction. They're not competing the same way that all these other platforms are.
Yeah, and it's hard to know what to do because there are places like Gab and Minds, and of course, like we are on Minds, and I encourage everyone to be on Minds. But the thing is, like, if you want to reach new viewers, especially if you're someone who's in the game of political commentary who wants to change people's minds, does it make sense to go and restrict yourself to a platform where only the initiated go to, right? Because normies aren't really on Gab or Minds.
Right.
So
I mean,
it's hard.
yeah, I was actually having this discussion with Brian and Sean earlier, is that to a certain point, like these platforms can crop up, your Minds, your Gabs. I think even Jordan Peterson just put his own out recently as well.
Well, Tumblr still exists too, remember?
Right. But the problem is that these companies will never become, I guess, wildly successful without adopting the masses. And until there's really no reason for them to care. We care that people get censored. We care that people aren't getting a platform. We care they're being demonetized, but the vast majority of people on these platforms don't.
But is it true though? I mean, everyone wore a hat when Kennedy was president, and then Kennedy stopped wearing hats, and
before my time.
I know, but no one wears hats anymore. And if you do see a fedora in a car, you're thinking, oh my God, that guy's 90. Maybe I should keep a wide breath because you can't see.
Or he's got katanas and
Well,
the point is, like, there can be massive changes like that. That's an example of a massive social change where everyone just decides, I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah, and I mean, we do kind of see that. Like, I think we think of like Facebook as this indestructible tech giant. A lot of people are leaving Facebook, and not just because of censorship issue, but because it's not the cool place to be anymore. I think I've seen stuff say that like the younger generations are more likely to be on Instagram and Snapchat than Facebook, because Facebook is kind of being known as where your mom and your grandma
fight about politics.
Yeah, and your teachers even are on. It's not really a hip, young, cool place to be anymore. But I think one of the biggest things that we can do for online censorship is just like let people know about it, because I think a lot of people just like don't know about it, because this hasn't really become a huge issue that's in the mainstream dialogue quite yet. It might feel like it is because we're the type of people who are like plugged into the issue because it affects us directly, but your average person just doesn't. I think if there were more of a public outcry, then action would be possible, but we're still at the point in the battle where we're just trying to raise awareness of it.
Yeah, and you will see actual real world results in the politics of this, right? You don't have politicians without Twitter aren't real politicians nowadays. And we did see, I think, with Tommy Robinson's campaign and things like that, that in the UK that they were actually banning campaign accounts.
Yeah, like his and Sargon's.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, we're at a point where it is becoming scary what the kind of power that these platforms wield in real world politics.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of throwing back to an earlier point too. It's not something else that I kind of consider. We talked about how the old media dislikes the new media because they're taking their spot, and they have a personal grudge against them too. But I think there's also a point to be made that these new platforms, these Facebooks, these Twitters, they're seeing how much with the last election in America, we see how much traction they give to the election itself. They're becoming, without them, elections would be entirely different, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm not really making a question here, but it's just kind of something I've been thinking.
No, you're right. And it's kind of terrifying to me, at least. If a lot of people were upset that the Russians bought some Facebook ads during the campaign, which is understandable because I think that is like an attempt to interfere and meddle.
Right.
But then what kind of control does that give Facebook now, right? If merely buying ads on this platform means it's interfering, what if the platform itself starts to control what news stories are trending or who can post what? That I think is a genuine concern for how democracy is going to play out.
Yeah, that's a good point. But like the old, back in the old days, like, a train company saying, look, we're not going to haul this candidate around to make speeches.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And like the fake news thing itself. I mean, granted, CNN and Fox News and all that aside, like you could have someone put something just entirely false and pay for 1 million people to see it. And because people at large don't check what they read, that could be taken as fact. It's really redefining the landscape, but it's turning things into, it's really driving home the old point that you can't believe what you read on the internet, but people do. So,
and it's so frustrating because on Twitter all the time, you'll see, this person make this like outrageously false claim and it gets like hundreds of thousands of retweets. And then after they issue a small correction, and it's like,
it gets 10%.
Yeah. Just like a small fraction of, and it happens on the news all the time. Prime time, the story will be covered, and then like tomorrow at 4 a.m. they release a retraction, or like, oh, sorry, we got this wrong. But it's like the damage has been done, the rumor started.
Yeah, I think this is a big revolution. Jordan Peterson keeps thinking this is he says a Gutenberg Bible level revolution for the spoken word, like YouTube and podcasts and such. And I would try to think back to the one before that, say like radio. That did change. You still had to be connected with a radio tower, right? So it wasn't just anyone could put it out there, but
you also needed like a license to be able to be in radio. You had to like take a test and be approved. You couldn't just be a random person.
You couldn't, but yet this was allowing political views out there that hadn't been out there. Like FDR, for example, like hated like Coughlin, Father Coughlin, who was big Catholic conservative. And you can create media, and that media can be disrupting. So I'm saying that there is some historical precedent for this, and I think we just have to learn how to do this. And I don't know, this is going to take 20 years, and I don't have the answer for that.
Well, it's changed so much even just recently. I mean, it's become one of the biggest issues, even kind of going into the next election cycle, which is, I think, kind of interesting. It's really, I guess I haven't been around for that many election cycles, disclosure, but it's interesting seeing how drastically the big topics that have come up are changing so fast. I mean, even just, I guess 11 years ago was the last, but yeah, even just 11 years ago, like tech was not even like hardly talked about, but now it's become this huge issue. It is the issue for a lot of people, is that like, what do we do about it?
Well, people are fighting over it. And it seems like how we talk a lot about like the censorship coming from the left. And I do see a lot of it, but I looked up on FIRE, which is they looked at, it's an organization, a free speech organization that looks at college campus speech codes. And I picked up two. One, at the University of Kansas, there was a flag art display. So somebody had taken the American flag and drew a number of pieces of art on this. And they had, ultimately, the president had caved to conservative social pressure to remove that because that was desecration of the flag, and essentially kind of upended an art show. And then also with the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse, which is a sub here in Wisconsin, it's an outlier college in West Wisconsin, invited Nina Hartley, who, if you don't remember, is like kind of one of the old school, I think, 80s porn actresses. And they had her give a talk on censorship. And funnily enough, the right then censors her because, like, how dare you bring a porn actress in to talk about censorship issues? And the professor that invited her actually got punished monetarily.
By Lena?
No, by the president. So, yeah.
I mean, I think with stuff like that, and
I get it.
we kind of on Twitter had President Trump saying that, oh yeah, flag burning needs to be made illegal.
Yeah, that's true.
And I came out against that. I said, like, okay, but no. Like, I mean, I understand, and we can absolutely say something is offensive and morally abhorrent, and I would never burn a country's flag just because, even if I don't like that country's government, for a lot of its citizens, like, that's their flag. So it's just like, you're giving the middle finger to a lot of people who maybe you don't know that you're doing it to. So that's why I would never do it, even if it was to a country that I'm not a fan of. But I think when conservatives start to come out in favor of censorship in that instance, but they cry for free speech when someone they like is deplatformed, I think you really need to examine, okay, but why this case but not that? Like, is it bad just because you don't like it, or like do you think your morals require silencing and other people's morals don't? Like, try to be consistent on the issue.
Right. And I do think that you're right like there used to be when I was growing up. Anyways, I'm a '90s kid.
It was the Christian right that was
the
censoring
Christian right,
media.
Always, you think of the Christian moms and everything like that. I mean,
Yeah.
we almost need a little bit of that back because there's some wild stuff out there. Right now,
happening with kids, but I mean, I remember that too, and I remember, like I used to watch South Park when I was a kid, and I probably shouldn't have been because it's like I don't think my parents knew that just because it's animated doesn't know it was for kids. So, but I got away with watching it, and I remember when I was like, gosh, 12 or something, they had some huge controversy and moms were upset. And my first thought, even as a kid, was like, well, if you don't want your kid watching it, turn off the TV. And I think like people of both sides just need to remember that like just because someone's saying something doesn't mean you need to listen to it. Like go for it. If you don't want to go to the art show, don't go to the art show. If you don't want to go to the, the porn actress, is that what they're called? Porn performers speech, don't go.
Yeah, the actress. I mean, like, come on, when you have a flat tire and like all of a sudden, like, guys are that's definitely acting, right? That acting. But anyways, like, so speaking for like Candace Owens, I think this is segues to you're going to be moderating a panel at our New Jersey Minds IRL event in New Jersey. That's on August 31st. That's Saturday of Labor Day weekend, and it's called "Changing Minds: How to Admit When You're Wrong." Like, would you have advice for Candace Owens on that? Then to say what she said, that I think Candace said, anyone that burns the flag will have 1 year. If I was president, would have 1 year to wrap up their affairs, liquidate their assets, and get out.
I think what she said, I saw one tweet about it, is that if you burn the flag, you don't go to jail or anything, but you have to renounce your citizenship, and it goes to an immigrant who loves America. As someone who's Canadian but loves America, I'm inclined to say, you know what, maybe that's a good idea. But no, seriously, if there's an instance like, and honestly, I doubt she has changed her mind in that wasn't long ago. But I think it's really hard, and we're going to talk a lot more about this on the panel. So anyone who's watching, who's in the area, should definitely come. But what I was thinking about is that with the internet nowadays, like anytime you actually do change your mind and evolve on an issue, you're kind of called a flip-flopper, or you're accused of grifting. Right. So like it's hard enough to just as a person sometimes, because we're prideful or whatever, to admit when you're wrong. But now we have that extra hurdle of, even if you do come clean, admit like, hey guys, like I've changed my opinion, there are going to be people who doubt your sincerity because of it. So right. It's like, it's really hard.
Is it a policy position? Would she need to like admit she was wrong if she was just saying, well, that's just how mad it makes me feel? Because a lot of people would say, like, if I was president, there'd be Ferrari for everyone, or something ridiculous. If I was president, I would ban Game of Thrones or something. It just means you hate Game of Thrones. Like, maybe she's just saying, I'm just a big patriot. That disgusts me.
Yeah. And I think that like, that's the kind of thinking, though, that I think leads to a lot of like, just because I hate something more, I'm willing to walk back on a value I'm supposed to have. Like that doesn't really make sense. It's like the people who say that, you're not really anti-rape because you believe in due process. It's like, whoa. We can all agree rape is terrible, but there should still be innocent until proven guilty. With the case of flag burning, we can all agree that it shouldn't be done and it's a rude thing to do, but still say, hey, it should be protected speech. So
okay. No, I'm with that. Also, you're going to be a panelist on the Great Migration, discussion on digital and physical immigration, and that is most like that means some of the news media migration from legacy media to internet media, as well as thoughts on immigration and human rights. So,
we have a lot to say about immigration. We just did a video on the UN. They just came out and said that Canada needs to do more because now the US is kind of like closing their border. So I suspect I'll have a lot to say about that issue as well.
Yeah, and I wonder if that would devolve get into like we wanted to on human rights. What do you think? Is healthcare a human right? Would you say that it is? I
did a while ago, and this video was hugely unpopular. Not unpopular that people didn't like it, but no one watched it. Like nobody watched it. I did a video about what exactly human rights are, and I looked at the concept of positive versus negative human rights. Did you edit that video?
I think so.
Yeah. So for me, I very much see human rights as like innate. So when I think of human rights, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, right to self-defense, things like that, negative rights that the government or anybody doesn't need to give you. If you were stranded on a desert island, you would have these rights. Healthcare is a positive right in that someone needs to be there to give it to you. European governments have, within the past few decades come out very strongly in favor of these positive human rights. This kind of thinking is also what leads some people to believe that things like housing is a human right. I don't believe that healthcare is a human right. With that being said, though, whether something is a human right, like healthcare, is a different conversation than whether the government should necessarily provide it to citizens. Because I do know a lot of people who don't think it's a human right, but because of economies of scale, believe that the government should run it. So that's a different conversation, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could, it depends on where you want your social safety nets. I mean, we didn't have those in the 1800s, and charities mostly were there to fill the gap. And this has changed. Now our safety nets tend to be government instead of charity run.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. And like being from places like Hong Kong and Canada, it's interesting looking at the conversation in the states surrounding healthcare, because it's like, I think they look at countries with like universal healthcare and they're like, we should do that. But I've yet to see an American policy that would actually be an accurate representation of the systems that we have over here. We see a lot of this talk on the federal level. The healthcare systems are like, they receive federal funding, but they're run by province and they're different in each province in Canada. So that's different. And then in Hong Kong, it's like, well, we have a different system too, because it's very much mixed public and private. So, I mean, the healthcare conversation in the US is one we've like kind of stayed away from because it's a headache.
Right.
I
think it's a tough one, because I think that to start, the idea of like having some sort of socialized healthcare strikes very badly with the people who believe in like the free market. So they kind of just dismiss it outright, while the people on the left see it as a good thing, and they keep trying to make they keep trying to pander more and more towards the masses with it. So you're ending up with these really ham-fisted policies that you see, Medicare for all, that really not trying to play into the nuances of the American system, but just kind of destroy it, or kind of just like one size fits all it. While the other time, I think there's a lack of the lack of interest. I think the lack of people on the right looking into finding healthcare solutions is causing a lot of issues as well. There's no alternative. It's either Medicare for all or nothing. So I think that this should be something that we kind of look into a little more.
That's how polarized we are.
Yeah, well, and I think also when I look at the like American healthcare system, and I for a while was pondering doing a video about it, but then the research ended up being like 40 pages. Like, so I was like, okay, well, this is clearly out of the scope of a YouTube video. I was looking at the cost breakdown of what healthcare costs in the US, and I think whether or not you guys choose to go for, a single payer system, you have a cost issue. It costs too much regardless of who's paying it. It's highly, highly inflated. If we look at drugs, part of it is because you guys are funding the research that the rest of the world benefits from.
Well, very thankful for that.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it a lot.
Welcome.
Yes, you guys have a lot of issues that you need to tackle, and I don't know how to.
Twofold at least problem where we have like healthcare itself, but there's also the fact that see all these like people say, the Scandinavian countries, we have the European countries that their healthcare costs are so low. But from my understanding, that's also because they are able to keep their costs low, and then they increase our costs on the other end because we don't have the collective bargaining system that they have.
Yeah, especially like with the drug prices, that's a huge thing. And, coming from Hong Kong, we have one of the most efficient healthcare systems in the world. We are also a small city state with a very homogenous, highly educated population. We're the financial banking center of the world. So trying to take the system that's implemented in Scandinavia and apply it to somewhere like Texas, it's not going to work. And I'm kind of a pragmatist when it comes to healthcare. Is healthcare a human right? No, but, Hong Kong has healthcare for its citizens, and we have a 15% flat tax, corporate and personal income. I'm not going to be mad about that because you're managing the money well. Like, fine, I get to pay 15% taxes. I'm happy either case. That kind of thing just frankly wouldn't work in the US, though. I really don't think it would.
Well, I think it's kind of got to, redefine the situation. I think if people at large are saying that, well, hey, people, we like to think of ourselves as, the greatest country in the world. We like at the very least, we're up there. So I think that to kind of keep that in mind, though, to a certain point, we should, if we have the ability to, we should look out for each other. We should at least kind of look into whatever policies we can put in place to help each other out. Maybe it's not the most fair thing. Maybe some people will benefit from it, while others will, pay more into it than they need. But to a certain extent, to increase the quality of life, I think is a huge thing that we should look for if we want to continue to be a good country in the future.
Yeah, it seems to me that nothing is going to get done without people talking to each other. Right. So even if you think like, oh my God, Medicare for all is the only way, and then somebody says, no, we need to be 100% private insurance. Those people need to talk to each other. Nothing good is going to happen when we're ripping on Joe Biden for him saying, God, so these segregation centers were some of the meanest people I ever talked to, but I had to work with them. Because you do have to work with people that even you can despise across the political aisle to keep the country on its foot. So I really hope we get back to that. The fact that we're ripping on Joe Biden for saying he could reach across the aisle is just not good.
Yeah. And I think something that we were actually talking about the other day that the state should be utilizing more, especially when it comes to the healthcare debate, is the fact that you are states that can act as almost little experiments to try to see what works the best. I would love to see individual states take more autonomy and try to figure out, okay, what can work for our states? Because frankly, I don't think a solution that works for somewhere like Connecticut would work for somewhere like California. I think that you would be very naive to think that.
And that's one of the funny things about America, because when you just said America is, we like to think, the greatest country in the world, or one of them, I thought it's such an interesting thing to say, because when I think of America, I could hardly think of one country.
Yeah.
Right. You really, it's almost like what your founding fathers designed in some
a confederation
perverted way that it's become.
Right.
But
yeah,
it is there's such a dichotomy between how your states can be, that it doesn't feel like one homogenous nation sometimes.
And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
No, I don't either.
I mean, because if you look, I don't think Californians want to live like Texans who don't want to live like New Yorkers, and I think that's okay.
Yeah. In fact, I think that allows for a lot of freedom within your country, so that's pretty cool.
A lot of gridlock too.
Yeah, California doesn't even want their government people to take planes to go to Alabama anymore.
That's true.
Alabama as a state is canceled.
Alabama is canceled, especially with Roy Moore trying to run again. Oh God.
Oh yeah.
Or Alabama. But that isn't going to happen. So, but anyways, funny end note. But we really appreciate you taking time to hang out with us and chat with us, and really looking forward to seeing you guys at Minds IRL and being on the panels, as well as just kind of talking. If you haven't been to one of these events before, they are a blast.
They are so much fun.
Yeah, tell if you were going to give a pitch, why should somebody go if they were on the fence, Lauren?
Well, I mean, I think the reason why I was glad that I was there last time, and I was glad at the Kilroy event that you guys organized, is that you guys are we've been to a lot of these conferences.
Yeah.
Your events are some of the best well run.
Yeah, you guys are awesome.
Yeah, we've been to good ones and bad ones. You guys are really awesome. And the thing about event planning is that you only really notice it when it's bad. When everything's going well, which I feel bad about, because I feel like you guys aren't getting enough credit for, but it's just a lot of fun. And I think when you have so many of these personalities and conversations happening, there's going to be these moments at Minds IRL that everybody's going to be talking about for weeks to come, where everyone's going to be watching and sharing these videos. The Sargon debate last time, some black guys did panel with that girl was really good. Mine was great with on an intersectionality. There are going to be so many moments that people at home are going to be watching and tweeting about, and so the opportunity to be there and see it firsthand is you can't replicate it.
Cool. What was your experience, Liam?
It was cool. I mean, when I'm traveling with Lauren, I'm always a little bit on the defensive, a little bit stressful, but there's a lot of strangers, but I had a lot of fun with everybody there. I like seeing that it was actually a truly diverse group of speakers, in terms of there was not a homogenous, a lot of places will say, yeah, we're inviting all sides to the table, but in reality, it becomes just one group that shows up, where I really did feel like there was some meaningful discussion to be held there. So that was really awesome.
And I also think it's nice because, on Twitter, it feels like everybody's yelling at each other. But when we get together in the same room, it's okay, well, you're a person and I'm a person, and I don't want to be a dick and you don't want to be a dick. So let's just talk together and hang out. I feel like
characters to make your point.
yeah, exactly. So it's like we
And you also agree on 90% of things.
yeah,
most of the time,
because
like,
ultimately like we like no one is like actually a fascist, I think 90% of the time, so we have that in common. And I don't know, I just like for how polarized things are getting, I think it is good to be able to like be in the same room together and remember like, oh yeah, you're a real person.
Yeah, that's a good
Awesome.
point. And there was a real bell curve in the audience too. It seemed like I every time I sat down kind of in the crowd, I was with the progressives, just kind of randomly, because you can't tell who's who.
Yeah.
And I really felt like there was like the 10 to 15% progressives, 10 to 15% conservatives, and everything else is somewhere in between.
And I think like for us, it's kind of a trip anytime because like we make these videos and then we put them online and we see little numbers and comments, but it's kind of hard to remember there are real people watching it.
Yeah.
Because like we work from home. So like for us, it's always kind of cool to see, oh yeah, like there are real people that watch the stuff.
I think you guys have an interesting community too, right? The skeptic community, which I think is a little bit different than either like the more conservative or the progressives.
Yeah, that's true.
And in a political sense, I think they're a lot more diverse than say our viewers would be typically.
Yeah.
Although I think that we're fairly moderate still, but yeah. So I think your community that you and a lot of people like you, like Armored Skeptic brought out, Sargon, people like that, that was also interesting to see. And it probably contributed to having a diverse group of people.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully
great.
changing some minds too.
Yeah, well, you can save a little bit of money. I was going to say, I can't use the word diverse there. You can't. This isn't diversifying your money, but you can save 15% if you use the code Lauren on your thing. I was going to say like that it's a coupon.
It's 10%.
Is it 10%? Okay. God.
Yeah, I screwed that up the first time I announced it too. You save 10% or $15.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I knew that the 15 was something. Okay, yes. You can save $15 or 10% off tickets. God, I need to go back to basic math. Use the code Lauren. If you guys are still on the fence, seriously consider going. They are a blast. You can personally yell at me if you hate it. So I'll subject myself to that. But thanks again. We really appreciate it. Looking forward to see you guys again.
Yeah, for sure.
Likewise.
Awesome.